No, it's just like. Good morning, RDPC.
Good morning.
Morning.
Everybody on Zoom, everybody in the room. Zoom room. Okay. I cannot believe it's August. I guess the one thing on my mind in August, which I just thought about when I woke up this morning, which is kind of weird, is that we're coming towards the end of the year, and the way our bylaws work, we have to start thinking about the directors for next year, which is a weird thing to think about when you first wake up. The way the bylaws work is that at the September meeting, we are supposed to introduce the nomination committee. In October, that committee is supposed to introduce the nominees, and in November, we vote on next year's board of directors. I have not had a chance to ask any of the other current board members whether they wish to stay on. But I really do think it's time for a new president. This one is getting old and feeble. So, first of all, I'd like to know if anybody here or in the Zoom room would like to volunteer to head up the nomination committee, and that person would choose two other people to be on their committee. I know Nancy has done it for the last couple of years. She's now part of the board, and maybe it's time for somebody else. So it's really not a bad little job. So somebody volunteer, please. Everybody's sitting on their hands. That's not good. No, this is,
That will keep the current slate of officers.
well, then you can chair the nomination committee and get the convince the current slate of officers to stay on. All right, I'll put a call out, but any club works on members doing something. This is not a really hard job to head up the nomination committee. And I've known several clubs, either they might be photo clubs, they might be others. There's one that my wife belongs to that was been in existence for many years. Huge women's organization that may fold because members just aren't doing anything. So let's not make that happen to this club. So please just chip in. What else? We've got our exhibit coming up in November. Anita, do you have any thoughts on that?
On Patricia.
Oh, Patricia. I didn't. In my mind, you both the same person. You might get even two of you, all mixed up. All right, we'll figure that out. Maybe Patricia will put something in the next newsletter. MJ, can you reach out to her?
Yeah, we have something in the current newsletter, and we want to, there's a schedule in there. Saying on what date you have to provide certain information to.
Okay, so look at the newsletter, and let's continue put that into the next newsletter also. What else? All right, so for MJ, of course, keep on putting on, giving her your photos or stories, whatever you can for the newsletter. MJ puts a lot of time and effort into this every month and does a really awesome job. Let's see what else we got going. Peter, do you have anything you want to talk about?
Yes, if you'll remember, we have a group photo shoot this coming Friday, 9:30 University of Richmond architectural details. The students aren't there. It should be easy to walk around and get a lot of fun close-up shots. And just as another reminder, the shoot in September is going to be at the Science Museum on Tuesday, the 13th at 10 o'clock at the Science Museum. And that also offers a lot of opportunity.
So this Friday, Peter, at UR, where would you like everybody to meet you?
The Modlin parking lot, back of the Modlin Arts Center,
And what time?
9:30. The weather is supposed to be good.
Cool, thank you. I just put it on my calendar, so I remember.
Question, the science museum, I know they charge to go in. Don't they? And is there gonna be a charge for this? It's a question.
No, that's good.
Okay.
As far as I know, Peter's all right. There's no cost to get in there, right?
Where?
Oh, the Science Museum.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the Science
Yeah,
Museum.
going to the Science Museum. I don't know. I think there might be a cost, yeah.
Yes, there is a cost.
Any exhibits you have to pay, but you just walk in the lobby.
Yeah.
It's like the very rest of the neighbor.
Okay. Cool. Nancy, anything?
Yeah, next month we have a speaker. We're going to have Bill Draper come. He's going to talk on tips and tricks, photography tips and tricks with a focus on the James River and the Tuckahoe Creek Park. He's going to touch on all aspects, including possibly some post-processing. He's actually put out a book of photos. You may have seen it at VMFA or other places on the James River. So hopefully we'll get inspired to go down to the James River or the Tuckahoe Creek Park and take some pictures. So it should be a good presentation. I'm looking forward to it.
So,
What was the name again of the presenter?
Bill Draper.
Oh.
I think, Sue, you took his
Oh,
class
yeah.
over at Osher.
Yeah, he's great. He has no life.
Yeah, exactly.
Pictures like at midnight, then at 5 a.m. and 9 p.m. or something, but yes, he's great. He grew up here too, so he knows the James
yeah,
River.
that should be a lot. And where are we meeting next month? September, we're meeting here?
September, we're meeting here and laying out the which library is it?
The fraud.
For October.
Okay. Would you put a reminder, put a reminder, of course, in the newsletters with the address?
Oh, yeah.
It's the most-
And in November, we have the exhibit, but we don't know where we're going to be yet for November.
Well, yeah, we'll probably. Yeah. So, MJ's gonna try to look at it. The exhibit, the hang date is November 1st. I know that, and, yeah, I guess there's that whole thing in the newsletter. Take a look at the newsletter. I'd like to get some, pretty strong, a lot of participation to that. What else, Richard? Do you have anything about the website?
Nothing new, but some of the old things need reminders, I think. Some of our capabilities and what we had decided to do with the web page aren't being kept up because, well, as one example, we'd said we're going to post the photo share every month, but I can't post it if nobody sends it to me, and I haven't seen anything for a while. But in general, anything that needs updating, let me know. If you want your
All right.
galleries updated, send me
Yeah,
new pictures.
I guess we kind of split the photo share up where Kemp doesn't have all the pictures,
Right.
so.
And the other thing about it is, I don't want to send the photos there because I don't necessarily know that everybody wants to share their photos on the web. So if they want to, then have all, they can send them to Richard and have them put on the web. I think it's a better way to do it.
Okay.
rather
I
than me.
can't hear you very well, Kim.
I was saying that I'm a little reluctant to send all of them to you because I don't know that everybody would like to have their photos shared on the web. So instead of me sending them to you, we'll have anybody who wants their photo share to be put up on the web can send their photos to you.
Okay, well, that's, if I don't get them as a block, it's kind of hard to manage. A bunch of people are sending me pictures individually for different purposes and I have to sort it out. So
Yeah, for the last, couple of years, except for the last few months, it's been easy because we were doing everything just on Zoom. So for example, last year I was getting little photo share photos and I was able to just send it to you. Now we're really split up where some people are, send it to Cam to put, because they're going to be on Zoom. And some people bring their thumb drives in. So it's.
yeah,
Yeah,
I see
Kevin is
where-
hesitant to, we can always, ask people to, just say whether they want to have their photos shared or not.
Frank has a thought.
Yeah, I think that's, I think you just said it, Ed. Probably asking the members to send them to one place, but designate in some fashion whether or not they're also for the web. And that way there's only one place to go, but you can designate the distribution.
Yeah, that's workable.
So Kev, how would you feel, let's say, instead of having people bring the thumb drives in, everybody sends you the photo shares with a note as to whether they would be okay with it being on the web?
That would, yeah, we can go back to them that.
Yeah, let me just, I guess, rephrase the question. There's some pictures that we voted here with that we were reluctant to put on the web. Anything that I myself photo share, I'm okay with it going on the web.
Yeah, I've gotten requests, in the past, when we're doing photo share and we're going to put it on the web. I've got a request from, I don't remember who, but somebody might say, I don't want it going. So, it's possible, and I think we owe it to the members to give them a choice.
Yeah.
Just as a management aspect, is it an individual picture within the block of picture that's in for photo share, or is it an all or nothing? All photos.
When you start pulling out individual
That's
pictures,
what
that's gonna put a lot, it's gonna make a lot of.
I just want to bring it up.
All in.
All of that. All right, any other discussion on that point?
Any treasury report?
Right,
The only, I guess, we are not doing a whole lot, so the money is remains relatively stable. And a regular checking, $1,929. The capital checking account 702, 32 members. And of course, we got according to our bylaws, we can have 50, so we could use more members if somebody want to join.
yeah, that's the point, I want to make that point, if you know anybody who might like to join, invite them to the meeting. As a guest up front. And, I think that's going to be a challenge for the next coming years to rebuild the membership to a certain amount. And a lot of clubs have been, had a lot of fall off this year.
That's a question about in person, so it's Zoom attendance. do we have a sense that people are doing it for health reasons or other reasons? Because I think that makes a difference on program planning. You know, we could do, if people will willing to come in, we can plan hands-on activities, group activities.
I don't know, I'm really hesitant to turn around and ask people,
Well, maybe a survey.
maybe some sort of survey, whether, people would be comfortable coming into a live meeting if we had a live things on.
Yeah, because that, as I said, it really would make a difference in what we do in the program.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. Some people are still a little skittish about getting in a room with other people, and I can't blame them. And some people just may like the idea of not having to come out in the morning, but I know Nancy is, do we have any hands-on type thing, Nancy, that you're planning for the rest of the year?
How to unmute. No, I got burned earlier in the season when we had something that couldn't be Zoomed, and decided that we made the decision that for the foreseeable future, all programs would be Zoomable. I am thinking that perhaps in October, we will have a semi all hands-on, in that maybe in anticipation of the November show, we could maybe cut some mats for people, do things like that. But no, we're going to have all the programs will be hybrids. They'll be Zoomable. We canceled all the ideas we had for in-person kind of meetings that could not were not compatible with Zoom.
All right, I've never created one of these online surveys, so Survey Monkey or something like that, so this might be a good experiment. Where create, something where, everything comes back anonymously, or, if we had a hands-on type of program with people come in and participate. Thanks. What else? I guess I just want to emphasize that the question about the nominating committee and all that, that's in our bylaws. We have to have that. This is not, I mean, we have these set of rules, and we really, as an organization, and we're incorporated, and we're not really subject to strict rules, but it's something that we really must do. And whether you get somebody, few people, just need one person to head this committee, and get two other people, and basically what you want to do is canvass the current board, see if they're willing to just roll over, which has been, Nancy for the last couple of years, that's all she had to do. I would certainly like to see the president, and it's not because I want to stop being president. I think because it'll be healthier for the club. I've been president for 3 years. It's been an honor, privilege, and a whole lot of fun for me to do that.
Frank has a hand up.
Frank?
Yeah, I'll head the nominating committee if you like.
Thank you. See, it takes a new member.
Thanks, Frank.
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, Peter, I'm excited about seeing you at UR Friday at 9:30 by the Milan parking lot. Peter, do you think you can get an email out to the whole membership?
Sure.
About that, and maybe there'll be people who are not here who would be excited. I mean, the architecture at UR, I think we all know, it's just absolutely fantastic. And I think it would be a whole lot of fun to do.
Where are we gonna meet? Where is the location? What's the meet that you're going?
At the Milan parking lot. Milan Center parking lot. You know, they have all these big signs as you're driving through as to where everything is. It's like, if you don't belong, if you don't know where anything is, you don't belong there. But they've been a little,
They have a online map you can print off.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, anything else before we roll into today's program? How many, what are we calling it? Steroids do we have?
Hey, what?
I think, Richard, I'm sorry, I've been a little delinquent. You're going to give your program today, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, well, let's start with the Richard's program on comparing mirrorless to whatever you call the other thing.
DSLRs.
Yeah, I'm a real techie.
All right. What do I have to do to share my screen? Just hit share screen?
Yeah, if you're on a computer down by the bottom, there should be an icon or something that says share screen.
I think it's a green button.
Okay, let's see.
Yeah, it's a green button with an arrow pointing up that says share screen.
Okay, hang on, let me rearrange some things. All right. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, good. On this
You're
subject,
still not sharing your screen.
I hit share screen, you don't see it?
But then you hit share screen and then you have to choose which screen you're going to share.
I already did that.
And then hit the little share on the lower right hand corner.
Right.
Say again?
After you select the screen, on that screen where you select the screen that you want to share, on the lower right hand corner, there's a green button that says share.
Okay, that's good. I don't see it. Oh, all right. There it is.
There we go.
Yay.
You got it now?
All right.
Wonderful. All right.
Minimize the screen on the right. Ken.
This subject struck me a few months ago when I read an article that said that Canon had announced at the end of last year, well, they didn't announce it, they revealed it, that they weren't going to develop DSLRs anymore, and that their last flagship camera, the 1DX Mark III, was the last DSLR they would produce as a flagship. So that, and looking around, other manufacturers had done pretty much the same. Sony got out of it, I think a couple of years ago. I'm not sure what Nikon's status is, but they all seem to be shifting. And so I looked at where the market is, and it's pretty obvious why. You can see this all right. This is camera sales up until 2016. Unfortunately, it doesn't go any further than that. But it's broken down. The first group is analog, or in other words, film cameras and similar, which is gray. The compact digital market, which was the elephant in the room for a long time. Then green is DSLRs and red is mirrorless. And you will notice that the current elephant in the room is smartphones, which is yellow. And I've included since they go off the chart, I've included a scaled version of that so you can see where cameras fall in relationship to the whole market. 1.5 billion smartphones were sold in 2016 compared to what, about 24 million cameras. So it's a shrinking market. And you see it falls off a cliff about the time that smartphone sales equaled camera sales. So obviously cost in a market like that is a prime consideration. And mirrorless cameras are a simpler device, at least mechanically. So it was my assumption that they might be less costly to manufacture and therefore would have a market advantage. But I started looking into it just out of curiosity. But first, let's think about what is a mirrorless camera. So here's a diagram or schematic of a DSLR. And the purpose of SLRs in general is to provide an optical path for the viewfinder separate, or to provide a path for the viewfinder through the objective lens here, which wasn't possible with cameras before. You had either simple cameras had a little more than a sight, or a separate optical viewfinder, or probably the most sophisticated was the twin lens reflex that duplicated the objective lens, but it was still separate and was kind of a Rube Goldberg linkage between the two lenses. So anyway, the DSLR provides a separate path via this mirror. This represents the pivot here. Can everybody see the pointer well enough?
Yes.
Okay. This is the mirror that is at issue in the viewing position. It interrupts the optical path that would otherwise go to the sensor or the film in the old days, and directs it to a focusing screen here. And the first DSLRs, the first SLRs stopped at that point. They were waist level finders. This goes back to the 30s. And they were oriented wrong because there weren't enough mirrors to flip the image around. So you were looking at an image that was upside down and backwards, and you had to look down into it to see it. The pentaprism was added, though, sometime in the 40s, and that turned the image around right way and put it at eye level so you could look at it through a viewfinder. When digital came along, we added yet another mirror. So we're not just talking about one swinging mirror, which is the primary mirror, but most cameras use a secondary mirror, and this is partially mirrored on the main mirror, so that you can intercept a second path for autofocusing that goes to a phase detection system, usually down below it somewhere. And then something that's not shown here is the metering is usually up here somewhere in the pentaprism housing that intercepts the secondary reflection from the pentaprism, and it enables you to measure exposure. So let's see, I'm losing track of where I am. So that's why the mirror is there. Without that, we had much cruder means of composing an image, and since then we've added more functions, autofocus, through the lens metering, and all of that. And as an aside, then there's Sony, which is kind of a hybrid. The later Sony DSLRs, starting in about 2014, I think, and then they discontinued it a year or two ago, were DSLRs that weren't really. They had a mirror, but the mirror did not pivot. It was fixed. It was partially mirrored, so it passed the optical path onto the sensor, but it reflected enough of the light to be able to do phase detection for autofocus off of this mirror, which meant that you didn't have a optical view through the viewfinder, so they used an electronic viewfinder for these cameras. This is the Alpha series. I think the 77 was a APS-C and 99 might have been full frame. So this is an oddball, but anyway, that's no longer manufactured either. So, oops. So talking about mirrorless cameras, the term itself to me is an oddball, because if you start naming something by what it isn't rather than what it is, you kind of open the door for confusion. And the reality is we had mirrorless digital cameras for a decade before we ever called them mirrorless. And this is an example of an SLR-like camera that used an electronic viewfinder and functioned much like an SLR. The only thing was that it had a fixed lens rather than a removable lens. But this and everything down to the simplest point and shoot had no mirror. Like this is a picture of what was my first digital camera in 2001. The first mirrorless camera came in 2009. Panasonic introduced it, and it was the first camera that was actually called mirrorless. It was derived, excuse me, from their micro four thirds, from their 4/3 camera, which is another nomenclature that's screwed up, because 4/3 doesn't designate a size. I always wondered what, the 4/3 of what. Well, it's not 4/3 of anything. It means that it has an aspect ratio of 4:3 as opposed to 3:2, which most other cameras use, which is what 35mm cameras used. And the micro 4/3 was a mirrorless version of the 4/3 SLRs, which incidentally is half the size of a full frame camera, half in the diagonal dimension, because obviously being a different aspect ratio, you can't compare the other dimensions readily. This is a comparison of the 4/3 versus the micro 4/3. Obviously, this is a DSLR configuration in their schematic. Has the autofocus sensor down here and auto exposure up here, the usual configuration. The micro 4/3 is much simpler, but the key thing here is when you take all this away, you're no longer, it's no longer necessary to have as much separation from the lens to the sensor as there was with an SLR. And in this case, it's half the size, so it shrinks. So what do you lose by going to a mirrorless camera? I mean, obviously you take stuff away, you must lose something. Here's the DSLR that we talked about. And if you're going to eliminate the mirror, that's what you're left with a mirrorless camera. which obviously, at least from a mechanical standpoint, is much simpler. Is replaced by a lot more electronics, which is why we couldn't have done this 50 years ago. But, so the three things that you lose are the optical path for the viewfinder. That's not a biggie anymore because we have a high resolution electronic displays, EVFs, that can replace that. The exposure sensor, that's a no-brainer because you can get better exposure information directly from the sensor anyway, so why have a separate one? And then the biggie is autofocus. So what do you do if you don't have the phase detection autofocus to work with? Originally, this was a big handicap because the only sensor, or the only autofocus technology available at first was contrast detection, because as the image becomes more in focus, it's less diffuse and therefore contrast is higher. So it would hunt around for the highest contrast image, and that was the in focus point. But it was slow, and it was although ultimately accurate, it would take a while before it would find the right place. Eventually, whoops, going the wrong way. Finger got itchy on the mouse. Ultimately, the means of focusing became a lot more sophisticated. There were hybrid arrangements that would some of them would use external infrared ranging and to get it close, and then contrast detection to bring it into final focus. Canon came out with their dual pixel autofocus, which initially was a game changer because it provided a way to implement phase detection autofocus at the pixel level on sensor. And so that was a big jump. Pretty much everybody now is using some form of dual pixel autofocus, even some cell phones. That, as initially implemented, was not as the same as the phase detection autofocus that was used in DSLRs, because all of the pixels were split vertically, which meant that it was sensitive primarily to vertical details in the image. And in fact, when I first got I have a Canon mirrorless with dual pixel autofocus, and I did a test with a lined sheet of paper, and it focused perfectly instantly with when the paper was oriented with the lines vertically. But if you turned it much past 45 degrees, it wouldn't focus on it because it had no detail that was with a significant digital component, vertical component. Many refinements have surpassed that limitation, and there no longer seems to be that problem with autofocus. So once you solve those, what do you need? Why not go mirrorless? So here are the advantages that mirrorless offers you, and probably don't have time to go through and with each in detail, but obviously it's a smaller camera. Functionally, the mirrorless camera is always in live view, so you don't need a separate live view mode for either stills or video. You're using the same technology either way. It's a silent, or can be silent and vibration free if an electronic shutter is used. And there's some problems with electronic shutters that take too much time to go into now, but consequently, most mirrorless cameras use a mechanical focal plane shutter and only implement an electronic shutter when the need for it, excuse me, for silence or vibration free is critical to your photograph. Obviously, you don't need mirror lockup. You get higher burst rates. Potentially, you can have better reliability because you don't have the mechanicals to worry about. So lower parts count. Ability to display the same information as a viewfinder is on the view screen because they're just two view screens. You can do whatever you want with it. You can have image post view in the viewfinder. You can vary display brightness as simulated exposure so that as you make adjustments, you can see directly the effect in the viewfinder. Viewfinder image can be brighter. Ability to zoom the viewfinder for manual focus. Image isn't interrupted during exposure, and subject tracking autofocus is possible with the dual pixel arrangement and probably some other technologies. Here's an example I picked because the Canon 80D and the M50, which is their mirrorless line or their earlier mirrorless line, are on similar technologies. This isn't to say that they're at all equal. The 80D is a much more feature-packed camera than the M50, but they use essentially the same sensor. They're both 24.2 megapixel with DPAF. This camera actually has a later processor than the 80D. But physically, the change is obvious. The smaller lenses that are afforded by the more compact camera arrangement. Obviously, you have to have you have to use other lenses. And this is the camera I bought when I bought a mirrorless. And I bought it with an adapter so I could use the same lenses that are on that the other APS-C Canon cameras use. If you look at the weight, it's a little more than half the weight of the 80D. Oops, and then here's the top view. If you look at the depth of it, here's the lens mount flange right there. And here it is on the M50. So similar to the previous example, it's just a little more than half of the thickness. In fact, this, let's see, I don't think you can see it here, but the film plane is actually further forward in this camera than it is on this one, I believe. Here's that's the, not film plane, but sensor plane in this case. There's a sensor plane on the 80D, and it's, I believe, yeah, that's the sensor plane mark there. So that has other advantages because you've got to have space for the electronics, and the closer you pack the electronics to the sensor, the more the sensor the harder it is to dissipate heat from the sensor. And that's a disadvantage of a smaller bodied camera. Sensors don't like heat. The more heat you have, the more noise you generate, and more image noise. So cooling it becomes a problem. So the more you can spread out the parts within the camera, then the better you can dissipate heat. That's usually not an issue with still photography, but in video it becomes a limitation for all digital cameras. Anyway, we'll get into that. And that's about the end of it. This last picture shows the ADD and the, oh, this isn't an ADD, excuse me, a T2i, which is smaller than the ADD, but both of these have kit lenses on them that of similar function. This is actually a little more useful, I think, because it's 24 to 72 millimeter equivalent. This is 29 to 89 equivalent, I think. But that, to me, this makes a better walk around lens. So that's about it. If anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to kick it around.
Richard, I have a question mark. So you said that Sony has stopped DSLR and Canon's getting ready to, is that right?
Well, they're not getting rid of DSLRs, but they're not developing any new ones. So
Oh, okay.
what you see in the market is what you get. And they haven't done this as an official announcement, at least not at the time of the article I read. It was something that came out in an interview where they said they're not going to develop any further.
So does that mean that the future of cameras is the mirrorless?
No, that means the future is mirrorless.
That's what I meant. The future is mirrorless.
Yes, very, very definitely. That's what Canon's going to. And across the board, the new mirrorless cameras are pretty exciting.
Two questions,
features they
Richard.
offer.
Two questions, Richard. One, price difference. Is the mirrorless more expensive? And is there a learning curve?
Regarding a learning curve, I'd say no. When electronic viewfinders first came out, particularly when you go back to my old one in 2001, that was an adjustment because the resolution was less. They were processors were slow, so they were laggy. There was a time delay between, particularly if you were trying to move the camera around, you'd get a jumpy image. So that was an adjustment. New ones, there's a very small lag, but I don't notice it. You know, I like an optical viewfinder, but the additional information you can put in there with a once it goes all electronic, it gives you much more flexibility. The initially focus, and since mine's not the latest technology, you know, I don't think that's even a fair comparison. You know, I did have to get used to the way it focused because compared to the old T2i, but then that was a dinosaur by the time I changed. So my direct experience it really doesn't answer your question, I don't think.
Richard?
Yes.
I understand that the advantages of mirrorless, especially with respect to autofocus, is a particular benefit to professional sports photographers or something like that. But I thought I read somewhere that there are still some genres, and I don't remember what exactly. I'm hoping you can tell us. maybe it was landscape photography where professionals still prefer DSLRs for some reason. Do you know anything about that? And can you elucidate why that might be the case?
I've read articles where people kick around what they like and don't like. I don't know enough to address that. I don't see why it would be anything inherent in a mirrorless camera that would be less suitable for landscape or portrait, for that matter, than anything else. But
Okay.
Hey, Richard, a couple of questions. I think, all of the mirrorless are now full frame?
No.
Is that all?
yes,
Yes, they are, or?
yes, they everyone is making a full frame mirrorless now. Canon, Nikon,
And maybe-
Sony.
Fuji.
But not.
Fuji.
Still have crops.
Okay.
Fuji has skipped full frame. They're keeping their APS size, and then they've gone to almost a larger sensor than full frame. So their new camera has 50 and 100 megapixels, depending upon which one. But their main line is still half, what's called half frame, but it's a 26 meg sensor.
Right, and
Well, I like, this is interesting to me, I like the clarification. You said that we're going to a larger than full frame sensor. But then you start talking about megapixels. Manufacturers are stuffing megapixels into that same full frame size sensor. So we're talking about more megapixels in the sensor, or actually a sensor that's larger than what was the size of a 35 millimeter, film thing.
Well, yeah, and I'm far from a technical person with regard to this, but I do own Fuji cameras. The size of the actual physical size of the pixel has dramatic impact on its light gathering ability and what you can do with that. So they're by skipping full frame and going to a larger, which, I've got a name blank, what it used to be called, the 645, the Pentax, the big Pentax cameras and so forth.
Yeah, the medium format.
The medium format and
Okay.
Fuji's,
Okay.
yeah, Fuji's what they call their larger frame is just a little smaller than medium format, but it's larger, substantially larger than a full frame, 24 by 36, 35 millimeter size, what's called full frame.
Okay, that makes sense to me then. I was just.
And so therefore the light gathering ability of the pixels themselves and the detail, the fineness of the detail is greater.
Yeah.
That's their GX.
Yeah, that was the case whether it was film or digital or whatever. But
yeah, it's the GS. Is that John? Yeah, it's the GS.
GX series. And
Okay.
of course, because of that larger sensor, you have proportionally or even greater increase in cost, because that's the largest element of the cost of the camera, it's the sensor. So those cameras start to get out of most people's pocketbook range.
Yes.
Okay, Richard, thank you so much. That was terrific. I guess a mirrorless is in my future.
But, if I could be a little, sarcastic, I think mirrorless is the way of the future, because the DSLR market is getting saturated and the manufacturers need to try to convince us to buy new equipment.
Well, I I almost bought a new camera this past spring,
That's very sarcastic.
But- but I almost bought a new camera this past spring, but then they announced that they were going to have a revamp of the camera. So I'm waiting for this fall, and the new camera that I'm buying just happens to come with a phone. It's the iPhone 14, and their improvement, so from the little few things that I saw when I was just about ready to buy the 13, they're coming up with improvements, and some of the pictures out of an iPhone 13 can be spectacular if you know how to use it. And it's amazing because the sensor size is so small. I mean, Apple obviously has all the software capability of anybody and everybody.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oops, excuse me.
And that's where you've seen some spectacular, I mean, you've seen billboard sized photos out of an iPhone. And therefore it's the going larger is questionable. I mean, everybody, a couple of meetings ago, denoise, Topaz denoise was a big deal. Well, Apple's had that in their system for years.
All right,
The Apple, I hesitate to get into that too much because that's a subject in itself.
That's a separate
But-
program, iPhone photography.
Yeah, well, cell phone photography, as you saw in the sales information, is taken over. And that's really where the advantage is. Because of their huge market share, they can incorporate technologies that camera manufacturers struggle with because they don't have the volume to advertise it. And the cell phones are excelling because of their processing ability, not because of the optics or even because of the sensors. Although the sensors, they were able to incorporate backside illuminated sensors and other more expensive designs before the cameras were,
Well-
because of that volume.
Again, okay, I'm going to say again, thank you, Richard. And let's move on to steroids and see, and maybe we could,
Nancy,
Yeah,
Nancy,
maybe-
hold on.
hold on,
Nancy.
Yeah.
Nancy.
Yeah.
Nancy,
Richard, at the top of your screen, you'll see. a
Oh,
little-
I see. Stop share. Okay.
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 Now, before we move on to the steroid thing, talking about the M50, and I appreciate the segue, Richard. Vicky's friend is selling some camera equipment, including an M50 with several lenses. So Vicky, you want to tell us about that?
Yeah. A friend of mine, got this complete system, everything you can think of. So I probably didn't show anybody here, what it looks like. And, so, talk about a segue and from Richard. So here's the camera and everything you see here. And I'd already given MJ the information. So there are pictures in the newsletter. But if you're interested, let me know. He was asking 400 for everything, but yet I'm sure he's willing to appreciate. So, and that's on Mirrorless. It is.
And it's actually the one that Richard was showing. It's the M50.
And we did not talk to you.
Okay, thanks, Vicky. What's next? Go ahead.
Can we do steroids now?
Yes.
Okay, and maybe when it's your turn, you're just, as a follow-up to today's program, just let us know what camera you used. We'll get a sense of how many you're using, mirrorless, et cetera.
What was that, Nancy?
I said, maybe when your pictures come up, let us know what kind of camera you used.
Oh, okay.
Frank, this is Frank.
Yeah, okay, so this is the original shot. It was taken from the Teapot Bridge. I used I guess I'd say it was a mirrorless camera. It's a Canon G12, which is not, not dated, no longer manufactured. A sophisticated point and shoot, really. It's got a small sensor and it does have the capability of shooting raw, so it's actually a fairly nice, carry around camera. Unfortunately, it has a limited zoom range, and this is as much zoom as I could get. And the intent of the image was to highlight that small tree growing there out of the bedrock in the river. And so I wanted, in the end, I wanted a piece, an image, an art piece that focused on that tree and contrasted it with the huge man-made structures behind it. And so the next image is one attempt to arrange the photo to emphasize that tree relative to the background. So of course I cropped the image in a fashion, that eliminated parts of the image that I didn't need and would have eliminated in camera had I had a larger zoom range. And in this case, of course, the modifications in post was to convert to black and white for most of the image, but keep the small tree in color. So that was modification number one. Yeah, wait, I thought there should be a couple more.
That's
images.
quite a change.
Yeah, that's quite a change. Yeah, really emphasize that. There should be 2 other images somewhere in there.
Do you want me to go? That's my picture, or
Well, there are the 2 other changes missing. I don't know. There were 2 others.
I don't see them. I don't believe. Well,
if they're gone, they're gone. Don't worry about it.
all right.
all right. Well, that's me. That's my out of camera.
was good,
Walking down Carey Street. And I just thought, make a nice black and white, but then along came the steroid challenge. Oh, and so the next one, all I did with these was cropping. These are all the same image, just cropped. That's the top, architectural abstract. That's obviously I converted it to pure black and white, straightened it, got rid of the keystoning, etc. Another crop, and yet another crop. So I find that there's lots of ways. Often with a picture, I'll blow it up to 100% and scroll around, and I find there's lots of different compositions within a picture. So that was just one of mine.
And that was shot with a DSLR camera.
Yes, that's I use the 80D. Oh, and this is obviously VMFA. That's the out of camera shot, not much there. Here I use 1.1 for my basic camera roll adjustments, and I do most of my creatives in Topaz Studio 2. And in this case, I did add some clouds. I find they have a very nice, I added the clouds in another program rather than replacing the sky. There's this program that you can just add clouds and they always blend in very nicely. So I added the clouds. I did some cropping and I converted it to sepia, and then I added some texture to it. This is again a crop of just the right side. Obviously, again, I did this in, this was done in Topaz Studio. I cropped it, converted it to black and white, and added a texture and then this little semi-frame. Totally different look than the other one. Then I got, what else can I do? So this one, I blocked everything out, made them solid colors as best I could. Then added a couple of textures over it in Topaz Studio. So totally different look, cropped differently, and a little more out there look. Nope. This is the group picture that I think MJ supplied. That's my my attempt at doing something different. Anxious to see what everybody else has done. Again, I just kind of simplified the whole thing and then put a texture over it. And then trying to do something totally different. Again, that's MJ's picture. I made a kaleidoscope.
Fascinating, Nancy.
Yeah, that-
Different. It was fun.
Very creative, Nancy.
Yep.
Who's on first?
What's on? What's on first? Who's on second?
Somebody needs to wake up Ed. Ed. He's gone.
Where's Kemp?
I'm here.
He's working on it.
He's working
Oh,
on,
okay. I found the MJ's picture challenging, trying to do something different. I don't know how everybody else felt about it, but it was fun trying to come up with something totally different. I probably wouldn't have done that to my own picture.
You're very creative. I messed around with it for a little bit and concluded I didn't have anything creative to offer. So
Who took that photo? I forgot, the shipyard.
Is that MJ?
MJ, is that yours?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was far. I.
nice shot.
This photograph, when I do my bird photography, I primarily use a Nikon DSLR, which is designed for bird photography, 20 frames per second DSLR, and with a 200 to 500 f5.6 lens. And this was the out of camera picture. And and it was a part of a rapid sequence of shots as this osprey is capturing the fish that you can see right there about the middle of his body. So then my first correction is to do some cropping, level up the shoreline, and just try to adjust the contrast and tonality that's enough to be pretty satisfied with a beautiful outspread wing picture. So the next one will be a black and white version, which I probably like the best of this sequence. And then the last one is kind of a painterly using Topaz Studio, one of the painterly impression.
That's my favorite.
Always to take that first image out of the camera and turn it into final piece, whatever taste you want. This picture was taken last year in December. It was in DC to go see the Van Gogh exhibit, and went to Kennedy Center, did some other things for a few days. This little camera, which is a mirrorless camera, interchangeable lenses on it, but it's a 27mm lens on a crop sensor, so it ends up being about 40mm. This was a shot, kind of what I would call a whole home shot of Washington Monument, and kind of a dreary day with an awful lot of distractions in it. So then I started working with it. Now, this is a case where I took and I cropped the image. I obviously couldn't remove all the stuff that was there, and yet I think it gives some character, space, and place, because there's always these vehicles around there and so forth. But I did the initial adjustments in Lightroom. Then I use far more than I do Photoshop. I use On1 RAW and photo effects, filters, presets, and so forth. And I have that work in some images, an array of cloud changes, sky changes. So I created this dramatic sky through a layering process that On1 uses. And I thought it was pretty cool.
Yes. Yes.
And then marvel to marvel, using the same process, it's in a totally different day. And yet the data on the film will, or the metadata will still say that dreary day in December. So it just shows what you can do if you use some of the creative tools that post-processing allow. And then I have a last one that goes back and refers to the previous image where I, whoops.
I went down better.
Black and white, which creates a wholly different type of emotional feel. So that was kind of fun.
That was done in light.
Hmm?
You use Lightroom and what other?
I cropped it in Lightroom and then did a little bit of tonal adjustment, probably spent no more than 5 minutes in Lightroom with it. Then I exported it out of Lightroom into On1 and went and picked out the cloud effects that I wanted, did some further color and tonal adjustments, and then took the image, and for the black and white version, I took that one because I prefer DxO Dick special effects. I took it and put it into that to get the black and white. I would say, although it was broken up over a course of time, because sometimes I look at an image and then come back to it later, but it's probably no more than 20 minutes to a half an hour of post-processing.
Very good. Still allow for one picture. Now, they live.
All right, it's Anita, this is mine. I started off, I do all initial processing changes in Lightroom, and I started off boosting colors and making it more colorful. And then I took it over to Topaz Studio where I do creative work, and by the time I got over there fooling with it, it just started saying to me, I'm a black and white picture. And so that's where I'm up with it.
In Topaz.
Yeah.
Where's Scott's photo art?
If MJ took a picture.
It's on Hatteras Island.
You know, this is one of those images, and when I first saw it, it challenged me a little bit. But it's sort of contradictory and acceptable as an image. In fact, it's a pretty neat image. But one of the things that I learned when I was first taking my photography courses at the New York Institute of Photography was keep it simple. Focus on a single subject and get that single subject into focus. And here is a really neat picture that defies that basic principle, because this is a very busy image, and yet it works.
This goes to show you the rules are made to be broken.
That's right.
All right, and then on this one, I decided to do some color in it. And get some texture in the background, more rustic, and you can't see it on here, but it says Polaroid down.
I like that.
Yeah, I was being around looking for a frame and ran across this, I thought, well, it's like an old Polaroid picture. So I stuck that frame.
That's cool.
And it looks all faded too, like.
Mhm. And then the other one. All right, and this one, I took that bright picture that I had done initially, those changes, and I went in Topaz Studio into what's called AI Remix. And in that, it's a preset. And I didn't do a lot of changes, just opacity probably with it, but just for something completely different at Christmas.
That's pretty cool. Yes.
I think, is that mine?
Yes.
I think it is. It was a tough picture, and no disrespect to you, MJ, that's my fault. I kept saying inspire me. So I just did something simple. I just put gradient and just tried to lighten up the colors and make it look like there's a little bit of fog there. So that's all I did on that. And I used Photoshop. And I just like, what am I gonna do with this picture? And I put it, it fell into the water. I had to use
I like it.
I had to find the right bubble. Because every time I would see something, it really looked like somebody just took water and splashed it on cellophane. So I had to find it, and I used a Gaussian blur. on the bubbles and in the picture itself, did a lot of masking on that.
Is the title of this piece Rising Sea Level?
Yeah.
I was thinking the same thing. You should send a copy of that to Al Gore. He can use that in his next book.
Okay. So that's what I did with that. And then the third one, and then this was just, you know, just hard to inspire. And this one, again, I just muted a lot of colors, played with levels and curves and threw in the sun. And again, just to give it a morning thought. And that's, boy, MJ, that was tough. That was tough. I'm like, what am I gonna do? I tried to take out just one piece, one bow, put it on the sunset, but then that's not part of your bow drawing, so. That's it.
You know, your one that makes it look like it's underwater.
Yeah.
Made me immediately think of an article that I read a couple of days ago. U.S. Naval Proceedings. There's this naval officer who's a scientist, and he's been studying the ice melting at Greenland. And projections that scientists have is that between 2050, 2060, something like that, in 2100, most of the shorelines, like in the Atlantic, will be all underwater. It's really dramatic.
California will lead the way, I'm sure. Yeah.
So that maybe that will be your forecasting the future.
That's all the steroids that I got. Did you have some on your drive? Okay.
You know, Nancy,
Mhm.
can you hear Nancy? You asked a question about the learning curve associated with mirrorless versus
Yeah,
DSLRs and so forth. And I think Richard made a good answer, but I've kind of noticed I had been using Fuji mirrorless for quite a while, and I had learned it really well. And then I sold some of my DSLRs and bought a Fuji one a year ago, not a Fuji, but a Nikon mirrorless. And I noticed that the learning curve did become challenging for a while for me, and it wasn't about the camera and its basic functionalities, you know, basic controls that are similar on all cameras. It's that I think mirrorless has opened the door to have camera manufacturers make even more complicated, if you want to say it in a negative sense, or to an advantage sense, make it more options available just through the embedded, you know, software within the camera, that you can do so many more things in camera. It's almost getting to the point that you can buy these things with the number of picture controls and presets in it that you can just shoot a JPEG and already make it look artistic, like we're doing with studios. That's the learning curve, is to know what you have and remember what you have and decide, do I want to do that, and can I do that?
interesting. Thank you.
All right, can everybody hear me? That's why I moved up from the back. This, of course, is the original. I just put some strokes around it. All of these images were taken with both the images that I'm going to show were taken with the T1i DSLR. Okay, so the next picture. I call this Sailors Take Warning. And basically this is Photoshop saturation and then adding a color filter. And the next one, I call this upside down day, and all I did in Photoshop was flip vertical. And then the next one, I call this heart, and this is an orb, and this is using method that was provided by Patricia Munford. You can do so many fun things with this orb, these orb directions. And then the last one for this is you're going to need a bigger boat. So basically, I just got a shark fin off of the internet and then blended it in with some layering and Thank you.
It's really cute.
And then I put in I flipped the reflection so it looked like a reflection.
Yeah.
All right, and then the next set is the solo one. It should be there. All right, back to the Outer Banks. This is a picture that I took of Frisco Pier back in 2013. And it's not a very good image. It's kind of boring. Certainly the contrast is terrible. You know what's going on, but it's really not a keeper. So in the next image, I fixed the contrast using the standard Photoshop image adjustments, in particular highlights and shadows. And then I stretched the horizontal, I stretched the horizontal to give it, I don't know, just to make it look a little bit better instead of that very narrow perspective. And then I used black and white, topaz black and white to do the conversion and the frame. The next one is also topaz. It is part of their impressionistic set. This is a Da Vinci filter. So this makes it look like a sketch by Da Vinci. And then I borrowed, actually stole a Da Vinci signature off the internet and added it to the bottom.
I think 1.5 million.
Let's see.
You should call Park West Galleries. They'll scoop that up.
I think it's really cool what you can do with some of these filters.
Absolutely.
The
You know,
last-
the one about the one you stretched, the
Yeah.
immediate thought when you said you stretched it, is some guy would have this picture and he'd be driving all over the Outer Banks trying to find that pier. It never find it.
And this is my favorite. This one is fun.
Yeah.
Again, we're using one of the impressionistic filters from Topaz Impressions. And these are figures that I took from a picture online that I found under American Impressionist. The artist is Edward Henry Potash. Anyway, I isolated and extracted the figures using Magic Lasso. This is all Photoshop, and then layered them onto the pier image. And then I added the stroke and the frame to kind of go with the color.
Wow.
Nice.
That's really sick.
Put magic in the bottom. Or bizarre.
I don't know, with all this stealing, I think I have to make a citizen's arrest.
Not recording now, Tim?
Very nice.
That's really good. Yeah. Sitting here, because I took a look at some of, my photos and also the photos. And for some reason, I don't know, it's been going on way too long. My creativity is just like, I don't know, I do something, I go, I would like it, But these have been great. And, I really appreciate it. It's very inspiring to me to see you all do this. And you're using different programs. And some of you use Topaz and use Photoshop. John was using On1. We've got all these tools out there use, and it's, it's really great to see. I mean, yeah, I think historically, I'm pretty much a straight photographer. I like to do straight photography. But I'm always thinking about different ways to make my photos look different and see if they look better that way to me. This has been absolutely great. And Nancy, thank you for bringing this up and making it happen.
Thank you for participating, everyone. Wouldn't be a program without the member participation.
And next got to do this again too. I didn't have anything this time, but next time I will.
Me too.
Thank you.
I don't know, we need Richard a round of applause for his presentation.
That, I gave him, I'll tell you, I'd rather.
Well, that.
He's operating.
I have a few photos from July. We're getting kind of short. We want to try to knock those out.
Sure.
The
Wow.
photos there from July.
Yeah, speaker. Oh.
Oh,
Well, that's a plain like steroids.
that's Ed and I were over shooting at the airport, and that's one version of a Southwest flight coming in. These are last month's shots.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's.
Okay. Well, that's another one. All of these, I think, are airport shots.
It's
Dressed up.
the new Peter look, no people in it, no, and photoshopped.
Well, don't get used to it. As I said, it's fun over there because you can stand right underneath.
Wow.
I think that's it from the airport.
Cool.
Particularly like the one with the sun in the frame.
Yeah.
Oh. Those are mine. It's the first time we went down to the Diamond, and probably be the last time. Because it was just so crowded and all of that, but Kemp, you could kind of look through it. I took a few. And then we were underneath. And I used my DSLR long lens. I try to shake the camera a little bit, and vary the seconds.
These all had it on still.
I'm sorry. Okay, no, I had it on a tripod and I would,
Okay.
keep it straight or just move it a little bit here and there. No, I didn't want to. I brought a filter with me and I like ditched that as soon as they started doing the fireworks. I was like, oh my God, forget it. And it's, if you've ever been down to the Diamond, they have like 2 sets of fireworks going on right above the stadium, and then further down, it's like, which one do you catch?
What were you shooting at, Sue? Like 1/15 of a second or what?
Sometimes 20 seconds, sometimes 5, sometimes
Okay.
it was 2.5, and I would vary my f-stops as well. I just tried a lot of different things. Yes. Well, I was out on the street with millions of others. People. Are you on the street? No, I was not in the stadium, and I'm glad because, you know, they just had different, it was just two sets of fireworks going on, and I'm glad it was not right in the stadium for the game. Which we won, by the way, so.
Okay.
I want to go somewhere where there's water, like in the Baltimore Harbor next time.
Wow.
Yeah.
That one's cool. I think that's it.
Good job, Sue.
Thank you.
Nice.
Is that it?
That's all of the last month's.
All right, guys. Let's see, next month we have a presentation, which is gonna be exciting. Again, if y'all know somebody who might be interested in coming as a guest, please invite them. And, you know, like I said, I think for the next year is, we're gonna have the challenge is going to be to get our membership up to a little bit larger number, so we have more diversity. And I think that would be great. We're not the only club that is, you know, any type that is suffering from membership. For some reason, with COVID, it's like nothing really happened for the first year. This year, it's like, I don't know, people just fell off the face of the earth. And then, you know, they decided things that they were doing beforehand, they don't want to do anymore. It's, I don't know, there's going to be some really great psychological study at some point in time where, you know, the people in psychology 101 and, you know, in 2065, you know, graduating class, some things to really think about. Anything else anybody would like to say, or if you have any suggestions for programming that you would like to just throw up against the wall for Nancy to consider?
Please, all suggestions welcome.
If you don't have any now, you can always email her and let her know about it.
Let's do the steroid thing again.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I would really like to give it a shot. So if you're going to be at UR on Friday, I will see you there in the morning. I hope you will. I haven't been there in a while, but I've got some, you know, really fun memories of some of the shots that I took when I was there.
Good to see everyone. I have to sign off. Bye-bye.
Okay, y'all. Anybody know? Taking care of the back. Just, you know, around the country.